This week on the show, we're going to be talking to Mike Larkin about various memory protections in OpenBSD. We're also going to cover some recent WX or X improvements, SSP, ASLR, PIE, and all kinds of crazy acronyms. We've also got a bunch of news and answers to your questions coming up on BSD Now, the place to be, SD. BSD Now, episode 89, exclusive disjunction, recorded May 13th, 2015. Hey, I'm your host, Chris Moore.
And I'm Alan Jude.
And we're glad to have you guys with us. We got an exciting show. There's lots of good stuff to talk about. And here we are about a month out from BSD Camp. We were just talking about it before we got started. There's so much to do, and we're excited to be there. But make sure you guys get out there, too, if you can. This is your month warning. Yes. Make it happen. Yeah, if you're anywhere in North America, there's no reason not to go. Come on.
Yes.
Okay, well, cool. Let's see here. So our first headline for the week, we have some open SMTPD news. And, of course, it's for the whole family. So let's enjoy the fun for everyone here.
Yes.
But we got a cool article about setting up, of course, a BSD mail server. And a number of us, I'm sure, have done this before, at least for our own accounts. But this article is going to take a look at configuring your home mail server too, but even for the other people you live with. So in this case, the author here convinced his wife to use a BSD-based own cloud server for backups, which makes sense. I'd use that here. It's quite nice. Then the author talks about moving her over to the brand new Open SMTPD server as well. So another step there. So if you've ever had to run a mail server and, of course, had to deal with gray listing and all the intricacies of running one, of course, you'll appreciate the struggle he went through. I'm still on postfix here, Alan.
Yeah, postfix as well. But yeah, I was having the same problem. You know, when Michael Lucas and I were first working on setting up the book, we set up new email addresses for it. And then we were like gray listing each other, and emails were taking half an hour to get through. And it was just like, grr.
Yeah,
it's like we can't even get to mail each other properly. Maybe we're not the right people to be writing this book.
Book sale.
Yes, but we got it working. It's all good.
Well, I keep seeing this, and it looks exciting, and I've been on postfix for a long time, but we've switched to LibreSSL and Open NTPD here, so I might as well, do some more OpenBSD tech. Why not?
Yeah, and most of it looks very similar to what I'm actually in the middle of migrating our Scale Engine mail server. And yeah, SpamD, Spam Assassin, DKIM, Dovecot, Roundcube, HTTP, etc.
So does it work with Dovecot and all that, I assume?
That's what the tutorial actually describes, is setting up OpenSMTPD, SpamD, ClamAV, and ClamSMTP, Spam Assassin, SpamPD, DKIM Proxy, which is for domain keys signing your emails, Dovecot Pigeonhole, Roundcube, and the OpenBSD HTTPD.
Yeah, this is nice. It basically got everything in it.
Yeah. And he also talks about the struggles he had getting his email to actually get delivered properly to Gmail and so on. And then also talks about using the BGPD stuff that we talked to Peter Hessler about for distributing this spam blacklist so that he can get real-time updates on which email, which addresses to block mail coming in from. So that's
this
pretty
is
good.
Definitely nice. I assume he did this on OpenBSD.
Yes, he did.
I didn't see what version it was, but
I'm guessing the latest one.
Probably something recent. Well, very nice. So yeah, this is a great tutorial. If you're curious, which I am now curious, I may have to read through this a little closer so I can follow it maybe one of these weekends and switch my mail server over, see what breaks. Anyway, then I'll have to write my own tutorial on how I fixed it to do the IPFW stuff instead of the PF rules he shows here. But definitely cool. Okay, well, next up we have some NetBSD. NetBSD on the Edge Router Lite specifically. Yes. So, of course, we've talked a lot about BSD-based routers and, of course, us building little PCs for that or all the little devices you can find. But unfortunately, when you do that, not a lot of them really are in the same price range as going down to a Best Buy or Walmart or whatever and getting your $50 box off the shelf.
Yeah.
So, in this case, we have something that's a little closer to that, though, the Edge Router Lite, which is a small MIPS powered machine, is starting to become more popular and cheaper. I don't see the price here. How much is that running?
But it's MIPS 64, so it's fully 64-bit and stuff. But I think the biggest draw compared to a lot of the other solutions is the form factor is the same as what you'd expect from a little off-the-shelf unit, right? It's not something bigger and noisy or anything like that. It's exactly like the one you bought off the shelf, except you can run your favorite BSDs on it.
Nice. Okay, well, here we are. It's the $100 MSRP, so probably around that price range is what you can find.
You can definitely pay more than that at Best Buy for a higher-end one. So
you can. This is pretty nice, though. So looks like it's got 3 ports on it and then a console. Yeah, this is cool. But, of course, NetBSD, since it runs on everything, will run on this. So we have a link here to a blog post where a NetBSD developer started hacking on it. And, of course, he documented the steps to getting a working install on it. So now you can follow that and not have to figure it out on your own. But the process is fairly simple. You can cross-compile on your other CPU architecture. So if you got a bigger box somewhere, of course, you'll want to build that on your AMD 64 beefy system. Oh, here's somebody in IRC said $93 on Amazon. So that is a pretty good price. So this is pretty slick. And then you can follow the rest of his tutorial to get it built and installed on there. And also, it looks like OpenBSD and FreeBSD also have some support for these devices. So you may have some other BSD options as well.
Exactly. Sounds like it'd be a good router.
I'm just checking here. How much customization really did he do? It didn't look like a whole lot in the doc here. It looks like he just built it and splatted it on there.
Exactly. It looks quite good.
Oh, yeah, this is quite nice. Well, cool. Well, if any of you guys end up getting some of these and putting any of the other BSDs on it, make sure you post a blog article somewhere so we can bring that to folks in case there's any little tricks you have to do to get it loaded on there, of course. I'd be interested in a FreeBSD one, of course.
Exactly. 3 NICs is just the right number, too.
Yeah, that's kind of perfect. So that's pretty slick. Okay, next up we have, actually, what type of NICs are on there? Did you look at the hardware specs too closely?
I didn't recognize the...
what driver?
They're Athros AR8035s.
Okay. But they are gigabit.
Yep.
Okay. Cool. Okay, I'm excited. I need one.
That's not a bad price point either.
No, it's not, definitely. So next up, we have some BitRig news, and every time I think of that, of course, I think Bitcoin, but it's not.
Yes.
So we're going to talk about that. So New York City bug just happened. We got some links to YouTube, and of course, New York City, the BSD users group has their semi-regular meetings, and they do presentations. And this time it was John Verellino. I'm not sure how you pronounce that. I probably butchered that. Sorry, John, but close enough. But John was there to discuss BitRig, which is an OpenBSD fork that we've, of course, mentioned on the show a couple times. And he talks about what they've been up to lately and what's going on in their project, the difference in supported platforms. Also, ports and packages between the two projects are almost exactly the same, but he covers some of the differences in the base system, how he got some patches to be shared between the two, and finally some development model differences that exist between BitRig and OpenBSD.
So if you've wanted to do more, we had an interview a couple of months ago, but they've done quite a bit since then, and even more detail on what the differences are and why you might want to use it and so on. So it's definitely worth checking out that video.
Definitely, yeah. Queue it up in your YouTube client there. Watch that after our show, of course. So next up, we have some OpenSense and Hardened BSD news kind of smashed into one here. So speaking of those two, we've mentioned both, of course, on the project in the past. So brief refresher for those who don't recall. Hardened BSD is a fork of FreeBSD with a very security-focused drive there. And OpenSense is a fork of PFSense. And those two have decided to join forces. This is actually kind of interesting. I was surprised to see this.
Well, since OpenSense is based on a FreeBSD base with then all the stuff for a router put on top of it, they now have a separate build you can download from their website that uses Hardened BSD instead of FreeBSD underneath. And Hardened BSD is basically a research version of FreeBSD where they're working on security features with the goal of pushing those security features once they're finished back into FreeBSD.
Well, you'll get things like ASLR on there right now, and we've had shows where we've talked about Hardened BSD and some of the features they're doing in the past
and
as well.
We've had interviews with them and so on. And so so it's basically just the same way that FreeBSD has done it quite a few times. Like when a lot of the original security features were coming in from Robert Watson, there was Trusted BSD, which was a separate repo, get it all working, and then kind of bring it in as a working unit instead of a work in progress. And so that's what Hardened BSD is doing. But OpenSense is like, well, if
we'll run on that.
Yeah. So they basically have experimental builds of OpenSense with it. I don't think they're changing their regular releases to it. But if you want the extra security or whatever, you can go and download OpenSense backed by Hardened BSD instead of FreeBSD and give it a try.
Well, that kind of pairs nicely with them switching over to Libre SSL as well. So they're definitely looking at some security stuff, which is good for anybody in the routing industry. So if you're, of course, wanting to grab a BSD-based firewall at the web interface, you can go ahead and take a look at that and play with those new techs, see if anything breaks, and, of course, report it back to them if it does. So I'm sure we'll hear more about this in the future as they start doing more releases and more features land in both. So we will cover those as they happen. So before we go to our interview, of course, we do want to mention the first sponsor this week, which is going to be DigitalOcean, who we're starting with today. And that's going to be digitalocean.com, where you can go get signed up with the coupon code FreeBSD Now and get your $10 credit, which that's good for pretty much 2 months running a VM. That's pretty awesome.
And, creating a VM is very easy. You just go and click the giant green create button, and you pick from the different sizes, pick a location, pick an operating system. You should pick FreeBSD. And then create the droplet, and within 55 seconds, it's up and running with an IP address and all ready to go. And then you can SSH into it and get to work. You can also control your reverse DNS with your PTR records and do pretty much everything you need to do from the control panel. But if you're the type of person that doesn't like clicking around in an interface, they have a fully featured API, so you can script it all as well. So, if you're building machines and tearing them down all the time, then it's very easy to do that.
Automate that sucker, tie it into some build system or something. If you're using like Jenkins or whatever, I could totally see that being tied in.
Yep.
Or it's like, let me just create a droplet, do my build, and I'm done with that. Let's throw it away after we've gotten the content out of it we needed.
Yeah. And the other thing is they have hourly pricing. So if you just need the machines temporarily like that, you don't have to pay the whole $5.
Nice. And I think what's their basic come with as far as transfer, Alan?
It's got a terabyte of transfer, 20 gigs of SSD-backed storage, and 512 megabytes of RAM, which is a lot of stuff for $5.
Especially on an SSD. That's that's really cool. There's no reason not to set that up, guys. So if you're looking for something to do, head on over to digitalocean.com and spin up one of those FreeBSD droplets and get hacking on it. And if you talk to the guys, let them know that you heard it here on BSD Now. We're joined now by Mike Larkin, an OpenBSD developer who's taken some time to come and do a cool interview with us. We're excited today. So first of all, thank you so much for coming on the show, Mike.
Thanks, guys. Glad to be here.
Great. So go ahead and give us a little bit about your background. How did you first get into BSD, and what brought you to this point?
I've been a BSD user for a long time, more than 20 years. I started actually back when I was an undergrad in college with NetBSD, and this was back in the dark ages. This was before even OpenBSD existed. Once OpenBSD was forked from was forked, I then became an OpenBSD user for a number of years, and then due to work and other sorts of things, I kind of dropped interest in it for a while. And this was probably back around 2002, 2003 timeframe. And then I started to become more and more interested in it again, and eventually started using it more and more on more machines. And in 2008, I decided to take on the challenge of fixing suspend and resume on laptops, which at that time
something easy, right?
That wasn't working very well. So I was basically handed a halfway working patch and said, get it working and then come back and talk to us. So I got it working on one machine, and we kind of improved upon it over the years. And once that was kind of in pretty good shape, I moved on to implementing the Hibernate support for suspended disk. And that was what I've been working on for the last couple of years. That's kind of the history.
Right. Okay. So that kind of answers how you became an OpenBSD developer. You did all the work and they punished you.
Yeah, it was. And even to this day, as you guys are probably aware, there's a never-ending list of machines that have problems with suspending and resuming. So, and it seems like once you get them all fixed, then the next generation of machines have different problems. So.
Yeah, it's a constantly moving target, right? It's not one of those, we've solved that, now we can forever move on, you know?
Yeah.
Which, that's good and bad, I suppose. But so we're here to talk a little bit today about memory protection. This is an OpenBSD. So give us a background. What exactly is WX or X, and what does it do in layman's terms to help against attacks?
Sure. WXRX is it's a memory protection policy, and all it simply says is that a particular page of memory, which can have its own protections, read, write, and execute on it, should not be writable and executable at the same time. And that simply means that you can have memory that's read-write or memory that's read and execute, but not write and execute at the same time. And again, it's just a policy. It takes an actual enforcement mechanism to benefit from that. So what we in OpenBSD, we've had WXRX in various forms in the operating system for a long time, as far back as 2001 or 2002, long before I started working with OpenBSD. And here we are in 2015, and we're still making improvements to it. It's like all security protection mechanisms. It's not a panacea. It's not a be-all, end-all. It's just another hurdle that an attacker would have to circumvent. It protects you against, in addition to protecting against attacks, it also is useful for finding bugs. Most of the time, you'll find that applications really don't need to be writing and executing the same page of memory, and usually when they do that, it's an indication of a mistake more often than an attack.
Sure.
So that's helped us find a number of bugs as well.
Yeah, so it's kind of a program that has this problem and has been writing to memory that it later executes from, causes it to do weird stuff. This allows the users to notice, hey, this is actually an error, not just the program being wonky, so that if more people notice the problem before an attacker notices the problem and is able to exploit it.
Get it fixed quicker.
Exactly. And I'll give you a good example of something where you really don't need writable and executable pages at the same time. Going back to what I was talking about a few minutes ago about hibernate or resume from disk. In the hibernate model, and actually indeed in just regular suspend and resume, there's a piece of code that runs when the machine first wakes up from its resumed state. And on that page of memory, there's code and stack. And call it historical. That's the way it was for a long time. But what we looked at is we said, well, we really don't want to have that, because in theory, if somebody could hijack that page, they can inject something into the stack that we were creating, and who knows what might happen. So as part of the effort that we've undertaken in the past few months to solidify kernel WXRX, is to split up those pages and make one page for code and one page for data and stack. So that gives you an example of the kinds of things that you might find an application developer just unwittingly creating because it was just out of convenience.
Right. It was like, well, I don't need two separate pages for this. I'll just jam them both into one page.
Yeah. So part of what I did back last year when we were improving the support for WXRX was split up those pages, and then of course protect each page with its own proper permissions.
Cool.
But of course there was a lot more than that. For the improvements we've done with AMD 64 in particular over the past 4 or 5 months, we improved a lot of things. The direct map, which if you're familiar with what that is, will be obvious that shouldn't be writable and executable at the same time. If you're not familiar with what the direct map is, on architectures that can support a lot of memory, like AMD 64, it's possible to have it's possible to have a region of memory that maps directly to physical memory, so it makes it easier for doing for accessing physical memory directly. And obviously, you're not executing out of that region of code, so you shouldn't need a region of memory. So you shouldn't need executable permissions on that. So we removed the executable bit off the direct map, off the trampolines for suspend and resume, kernel code, kernel text, kernel read-only data, and a number of other ones. So we kind of went through the laundry list and examined in QEMU, actually examined all the page permissions and said, okay, that one shouldn't have executable permission, and that one should, and that one should, and that one should. And eventually we nailed them all down. So at this point, with AMD 64 at least, everything in the kernel is protected the way that it should be.
Oh, cool.
So what about the recent changes for i386?
So i386 is an interesting beast. We've had WXRX in i386 for a while, but it was implemented a little bit differently. When i386 was first developed as a platform, it predated some of the capabilities in later processors, and I'll get to what that means in a second. What we implemented was something that we call the line in the sand, and the line in the sand is a way of organizing your data and code segments so that code and data don't appear in the same segment. The way that the processor operates is every time it fetches data, it uses a data segment prefix, and every time it fetches code, it uses a code segment prefix. And those segments can actually be locked down with their own permissions. It's somewhat of a weaker form of WXRX because there are ways to, again, it's just another mitigation effort. There are ways to get around that, but with the latest changes in i386, we're now taking advantage of the non-executable bit that's present in PAE. So PAE is a physical address extension. It's been around for a long time. It's a feature of a processor that allows it, a 32-bit processor that allows it to address more than 4 gigabytes of physical memory. We've had support for PAE long before I started, and then we took it out. I had some bugs relating to DMA and other sorts of problems. I put it back in recently, not to support big memory, but to actually take advantage of the different kind of page table that it provides. And what it does is it allows us to use the non-execute bit, which is very similar to AMD64. So that went in just very recently in the last couple of weeks. So what that does is it gives us now a platform to build the same kind of kernel WXRX enforcement that we've done with AMD64. And that'll be coming soon.
Okay. So how would this work necessarily in conjunction with some of these other technologies like SMAC stashing protection and ASLR and PIE? Do they benefit one another or complement each other?
Oh, they certainly complement each other. Again, they're not directly related technologies, but as I mentioned earlier, this is just another a mitigation step, another line of defense, if you will. Combined with those other technologies, that gives us some pretty robust memory protection in OpenBSD.
Sure.
So how widely is the WXRX stuff deployed in OpenBSD?
In OpenBSD, we have it on Spark 64, and we have it in i386 and AMD64, of course. I'm not sure about the other platforms that may or may not have it in there as well. In other operating systems, it's kind of a hit and miss proposition. Surprisingly, Windows has pretty good kernel WXRX support. Some of the special purpose cell phone OSs have it as well. To be honest, I haven't done a lot of research in all the other BSDs out there to see what particular flavor of WXRX they have. They may or may not have them.
Cool.
So did it require a lot of careful attention to detail? What made this so difficult to get implemented correctly?
Which one are you talking about, i386 or AMD64?
I guess for i386 or both, were there commonalities that were troublesome on both?
Sure. So AMD64 was a little bit easier to tackle. We had a working model. We had a page table format that supported non-execute bits, and basically what we did is we went through each area of the kernel address space and turned on the non-execute bit where we needed it. There was quite a bit of surgery in some low-level assembly code where the page tables are created up front. That was probably the most difficult part. But once that was done, everything kind of fell into place. With i386, it was a lot more challenging. i386 was basically resurrecting a piece of code that hadn't really been used in 10 years, getting it working again. Of course, the tree had diverged quite a bit in the intervening 10 years. So bringing all the changes back in, making sure everything fit properly, and then, of course, getting everything up and running. It was AMD64, the kernel WXRX part that I did probably took about 2 months, and i386 PA getting it working again probably was about twice that.
Oh, wow.
So for the non-execute bit, is that actually enforced in the hardware then, or how does that work?
Yeah, that's enforced in the hardware. So when we have the PAE format of page tables with i386, we can now turn that on. We now have the capability to do it. We haven't done it yet, just mainly because it's been so recently put into the tree. We wanted to make sure that once we turned it on, we allowed the dust to kind of settle a little bit to make sure we didn't have any page table or PMAP bugs. It looks pretty good now, so we'll probably start moving bits of that back into the tree pretty soon.
Cool. So are there any downsides to using these features, like performance hit or software incompatibilities?
For AMD64, not really. Only because we've been using the same kind of page table format in AMD64 for a long, long time. i386, I would suspect, and I don't have any hard numbers to back this up, but I would suspect that there's probably a very, very small performance overhead. However, as I mentioned earlier, we have this other way of doing WXRX previously in i386, which can probably be changed or altered now to, we don't really need both models at the same time. So we may be taking a performance hit now, but we may be able to improve that later by removing the previous model. All things considered, it's probably very low, the impact. It's not going to be probably noticeable by anybody.
Okay.
Would it break any software, or did you find any of that while you were working on it?
For the kernel stuff, no. We found a couple of bugs, of course, things that were writing to pages they shouldn't have been writing to, but those are just bugs and got fixed. But from the kernel perspective, that's how things are laid out. Now, from user space perspective, you never know what a user application is going to do. And if they want to do crazy things with writing and executing in a page, they're going to try to do it. Again, as I mentioned when we first started talking here, WXRX is really just a policy. And if you don't enforce it, you really don't gain anything. But if you enforce it, you might break things. So in the grand scheme of things in the kernel, which is where I've been primarily working, we haven't really seen any fallout.
Right. And if there is, it's easy to fix because it's your kernel. Whereas with third-party software, sometimes it's harder to actually fix.
Absolutely.
So what's the future like? Where would we go from here? Is there any other additions in memory protections that we might be seeing added to OpenBSD down the road?
Well, as I mentioned before, this path started back in 2001 and 2002, and it's 2015, and we're still working on it. So we'll definitely keep improving it. For i386, of course, we'll get the actual kernel the actual page protections in next. We've been there before, so we know how to do that now. So that would probably be a pretty minor effort. I would suspect to see that sometime maybe later this summer or in a couple of months. As far as AMD64, I think it's actually in pretty decent shape now from the kernel perspective. So I don't anticipate a lot of wholesale changes there. Really, again, the next effort will be focused on i386. I primarily focus on the PC platforms, AMD64 and i386. So there may be other developers that are working on improving WXRX on other platforms. But you probably have to track one of them down.
Sure. Well, if you talk to any of them, send them our way. We'll, of course, get them scheduled for an interview.
Was there anything else you wanted to mention?
No, it's been great to talk about this. It was last year we kind of snuck it into the tree without a lot of fanfare, and I think it's actually a pretty important feature, and I'm glad you guys took the time to talk to me about it today.
Yes, thank you very much.
We're grateful you found some time to come on and talk to us.
Exactly.
Great.
Well, thank you so much, and we appreciate you coming on, Mike, and stay tuned. We'll have more in a moment. Okay, hope you guys enjoyed the interview with Mike. I know that was fascinating, and we just love talking about security and all things related to that. But we need to head into the news roundup now. And before we do, of course, we want to mention IX Systems, which is the URL for that. It's going to be ixsystems.com, naturally. But if you go /BSD Now, you can go fill out the form and download their free guide on what you need to know before you purchase a server for open source. All kinds of good information in there. How to talk to management and make the right decision for your next hardware purchase.
Yes, explain why you want to buy from them instead of HP or Dell or anybody else that you normally would buy from. Also on their What's New blog, they have their post about Linux Fest Northwest. You can see there's Chris and I and Michael Dexter and other people we managed to nab while we were there. And there's Chris and Drew at the FreeNAS /FreeBSD booth. And had quite a bit of fun out there, didn't we?
Yeah, Linux Fest Northwest, neat. It's been like 8 years since I had gone to that one. It's grown a lot, and we had a good time. Next year, I'll try and make it to it again next year if I can, except I'll maybe book it earlier so I have a little more time to hang out and do some other stuff. But yeah, definitely was fun. It was neat to see the IX Systems folks out there, and they tend to be at a lot of these conferences. So you guys hear how we mention, of course, like all the big BSD conferences, Asia and Canada and Europe and everyone in between. But there's a lot of Linux shows they go to too.
Exactly. So if you just go to the front page of their website, in the bottom right-hand corner, there's upcoming events. And you'll notice that changes very frequently. But in a couple of weeks, the next one up is BSD Cairn. But then you'll see that will be full of Linux stuff again until EuroBSDCon in Sweden in October.
Which is kind of nice because if you can't travel or can't justify the trip or whatever, sometimes you may find one closer to you at a Linux Fest, and there's still BSD people there.
Oh yeah,
so you can go and come by and say hi. I know I go to a lot of them, but a lot of the IX folks go to those as well. So
and there are quite a few other people too. Almost every Linux conference has a couple of BSD people, and they're usually not that hard to spot. When we were at Linux Fest Northwest, when we were at Linux Fest Northwest, we ran into some people from ASLR, which were FreeBSD users. They're actually advertising their FreeBSD-based product at Linux Fest. So.
Cool. Well, of course, meeting them in person is great, but if you guys need to buy a new server or get hooked up with some new hardware, just give them a call or send in an email, go to our contact form, get in touch with these guys and let them figure out what exactly you need and explain the problem to them. Their sales engineers will walk through the whole process with you, figuring out what exactly is going to work best in your particular situation. So that's the IX Systems Touch, which is quite good.
Yes. So just the amount of headache that goes away when you can just have IX. Well, the biggest thing is like I used to build the servers from the Supermicro bare bones parts myself, but it was always like, is this not going to work together? And then I bought the whole system and then realized I bought SSDs. SSDs have an adapter to fit in a 3.5-inch bay, but it centers the drive in the middle of the bay. But for hot swap bays, the SATA ports are aligned to the right.
Side.
So I needed a different kind of tray to put SSDs into the case. And I just didn't even think of that until I got the machine and it was time to put it in production. I was like, the hard drive won't fit. So then I had to rush order different trays to put them in and all this. It's like, and then later on I found out about IX. It's like, if I had just called IX, it would have already been done. And when we bought our big storage server from them, Stefan was going to the data center. We had it delivered directly to the data center because it weighs a lot and it would just made more sense. And he was dreading getting there and having to put in like 144 of those little screws to screw the hard drives into the hot swap caddies. Well, they shipped the hard drives separately, but they had already screwed them all into the caddies for us and put them back in their super duper packing foam that they use. So when he got there, he just had to slide the hard drives in. It only took a couple minutes. And it was just like, wow. They take the effort of opening the hard drive, putting it in the hot swap caddy for you, and then putting it back in the static bag and everything. And then I realized, that's because they actually turned the machine on and ran the hard drives.
They used them
for 3 days first to make sure that none of them were going to give out. And that's the other big thing is that they have a burn-in process where they actually make sure your hardware works for 2 or 3 days before they ship it to you because hard drives. Studies from Google and Backblaze and everybody else has shown that if a hard drive is going to die, it's usually within the first 24 hours. And so
if there's a defect,
so eliminating those so you don't have to deal with them is just a lot of hassle that you're being saved.
Yep. So for sure. So next time you guys are in the market for some new hardware, check it out at ixsystems.com/BSD Now. And of course, when you talk to those awesome guys, let them know that we sent you. We'd appreciate that.
And so will they actually.
Yes, they like hearing where you heard about them from. So that's always fun. We know a lot of those guys too. So they might tell bad stories about us or something. I don't know.
Exactly.
Okay, well, it's time to get into the news roundup, Alan. So first up, we have a closer look at FreeBSD, and this is actually cool because it's again another BSD article making it into a mainstream tech site. So it's over at Techopedia, and we have a link in the show notes, so you can take a look at that if you'd like to read it, or grab the link to send to your BSD noob friends who maybe don't know some of the background of BSD. But this time it's kind of a high-level overview of FreeBSD, where it came from, some history there, some of its features, of course, where it's used. And being that it's more on a mainstream site, you won't find anything too technical, but it does cover some history, the stability of the system, ZFS, LLVM, and Clang, how ports and packages work, jails, and of course the license always has to come up because that's a big one. So if you got any BSD curious Linux friends, this is a good one to send around to your list there, and just give them something new to read so they can find out about FreeBSD. Anything you want to mention on that one?
It's just it's well researched compared to a lot of the other ones that we've talked about. It actually digs a little bit deeper and has a good section on the history, talking about how it started at the university, and then AT&T made a mess of things, and then that got sorted out, and that's when FreeBSD started. And then FreeBSD was huge in the 90s, being almost every dial-up ISP ran based on it. Yep. Lots of major websites ran based on it. It was really a big thing, and then IBM started putting billions of dollars into Linux, and it changed the landscape slightly, because all of a sudden Linux had marketing and BSD didn't. But BSD was still there the whole time, and is full of very good, very mature technology.
That's right. I mean, they even mentioned things like the PS3 and PS4 using large bits of FreeBSD, of course, Netflix and WhatsApp, and then they go through some of the derivatives. FreeNAS, they gave PCBSD a shout out, calling it our answer to Ubuntu, which is cool. And then, of course, they talk a little about Mac OS and iOS.
Yep. So and they actually have a link to Jordan Hubbard's talk off SlideShare, the one he gave at MeetBSD and EuroBSDCon last year.
Yeah. So just lots of good information there. So definitely bookmark this one. If you have somebody who asks you about BSD, you can just be like, here, read this. This is a great introduction to FreeBSD. Okay, next up we have Linksys news. Oh, wait, it's Linksys. So what BSD are we talking about? That's right, it's NetBSD. So the Linksys NSLU2 is a proprietary network-attached storage device that was introduced a ways back now, 2004. So naturally, somebody needs to get NetBSD running on it, and that's what happened. We have a blog post here where the writer here said, about 2 months ago, I set out a goal to run some kind of BSD on a spare Linksys I had. This was driven mostly by curiosity, and after listening to a few BSD Now episodes and becoming a regular listener. After doing some research, the author discovered he could cross-compile NetBSD for the device straight from his Linux box. How cool is that?
That is cool.
Use Linux to bootstrap it and throw NetBSD on there. So if you have some of these old devices kicking around, I know I have a stack of all old hardware. I don't really throw stuff away until I know we can't use it for anything. But this may give you an excuse to throw something on there and give it a new life and see what it does. But definitely check out his write-up and get some BSD action on those old Linksys devices.
Yeah, he also links to the wiki page at FreeBSD, where they had some instructions for doing running on the same system, although apparently the instructions are not very good.
No, okay. Well, hey, somebody needs to take a look at that, update that, and get us another blog post.
If you're the adventurous type and you want to try to get FreeBSD running properly on this device, grab the wiki page there, work on it, and fix the instructions so they're easy to
develop.
Well,
this is like a Weekend Warrior bragging rights project, right? So you can do it and then write the article and then tell all your friends, I got mentioned on BSD Now because I was the first one to put, whatever BSD on this particular device. And how cool is that? I wonder if we'll start something now and we'll start seeing people just throwing BSD on all sorts of weird stuff, which is good.
It'd be fun.
I mean, I like to see that.
Yes. I'm looking forward to there's a recent Kickstarter project for this little thing called Onion Micro or something like that. And I saw a tweet from Adrian Chad saying that it will run FreeBSD. So I bought a couple to see what they can do with them.
Oh, nice. Okay, next up in the roundup, it's time for some OpenBSD news. So first up, we're going to talk a little bit about disk label templates. So You know, in the past, we've talked about OpenBSD having an auto install feature, which is basically an answer file for unintended installations. But one area where we didn't really have a lot of customization was how they did the disk layout. Well, there's been some recent changes, and we have links to those if you'd like to take a look at the commits. But there's now a new series of templates you can use for a completely customized partition scheme.
So the tutorial kind of walks through all the different, the regular setup, but then the last thing you do is specify a URL to an auto-templating or auto-partitioning template, and then it shows an example of one here where you list off each partition, like slash and swap and so on, and then you can actually set bounds on the sizes. So you can say, I want my slash partition to be 75% of the disk, but I want it to be at least 100 megabytes. So if that violates that percentage, then do it anyway, kind of thing. And then, you know, swap, I need at least 10 megabytes of swap, but I want it to go up to 25% of the disk. And so basically allow you to set a policy that can kind of work on every machine so that, you know, you might have different settings for different size machines, but most times you want something very similar across all the machines, but you just don't want to say, well, you know, make 4 gigs of swap and put the rest in slash when it turns out, hey, this is a virtual machine that has 6 gigs of disk or something. And it's like, that doesn't make any sense anymore.
That doesn't work in this case. Well, nice. So, yeah, definitely you can start doing that now. And, of course, you could then combine that new feature with our stable ISO tutorial we had done a while back. So you could now deploy a completely patched and customized image and just do as many of them as you'd like pretty easily. So this is definitely a nice feature to see show up in OpenBSD.
Yeah, if you look at the Undeadly article that they link in the tutorial there, they have a section from the man page which shows you some more complicated examples of what you can do. And so in this one, you know, they have a slash partition that's always just 250 megabytes, no matter what. Swap that's between 80 and 256 megabytes, or 10% of the disk. So it'll be up to 10% of the disk as long as that's at least 80, but not more than 256 megabytes. And so on. And then for temp, it's like somewhere between 120 megs and 4 gigs, or 8% of the disk, and so on for var, user, a bunch of other directories. And then finally, home is a minimum of 1 gig, but up to star, and it'll inherit all the leftover space at the end.
Nice. Yeah, that definitely will make it easy to come up with some really unique disk layouts here that could kind look different across different systems.
Right. If you set it up just right, you'll have a disk layout that one size fits all kind of thing, where it will automatically adapt exactly how you want to whatever size disk you happen to be installing it on. Seems very flexible. I like it.
Yeah, definitely. I like it too. Okay, next up, we have some ARM stuff to talk about, and we're talking about FreeBSD on it. So FreeBSD current, you know, of course, building for the ARM architecture can now be built natively without utilities that aren't part of base. So we have a link to the SVN commit here. And looks like some of the older board-specific kernel config files have been replaced, and now the IMC6 target is used. And this, of course, is going along with what we read recently in the quarterly status report that ARM is now starting to get treated as a first-class citizen. So that's neat to see that happen and see more ARM architectures start to show up in there.
Yes. So there's pre-built images that'll be available with every release, and I think snapshots are going to have these automatically now as well. And it also contains the documentation that everybody always asks me about. You know, when you use these pre-built installs instead of doing the install yourself, what's the default username and password? So the default user is FreeBSD with the password FreeBSD, and root with the password root. But obviously, root's not allowed to log in over SSH, so you need the other one first.
Definitely.
The etc TTYs file on ARMS is also now set up so that both TTY v0 and TTY u0 are used by default. So whether or not it has a VGA console or the serial console, you'll be able to see everything on both.
Okay. Oh, very nice. Very nice. Well, yeah, keep up the good works, folks. And it's neat to see ARM definitely increasing in stature among the BSDs and becoming more of a first-class citizen.
Glenn's been doing quite a bit of work there to make sure that it doesn't take so much stuff that doesn't come with FreeBSD in order to build FreeBSD for ARM.
Nice.
So everything you need is now available in the base system.
I'm sure we'll hear more about this at BSDCan at the Dev Summit and such, about an ARM status update of where it's at and where it's going. I imagine for 11, a lot of that.
Yeah, especially with the focus on ARM64 and a bunch of other interesting things going on.
Nice. Okay, now it's time to get into the feedback and questions you guys sent in this last week. But before we do that, of course, we do need to mention tarsnap. And come on, are any of you guys not using tarsnap yet? Because you really should be.
Really should be.
Really should be. I mean, price is really not an obstacle here, but just the peace of mind and the security knowing that your data is stored offsite, away from the house. So the next time, the Russians or somebody launch something and it comes back down as a meteor and just levels your server shed out back, like in my case, you want to know your data is somewhere safe, right? So definitely go over to tarsnap.com/BSD now and get signed up. You can do that and be done before we finish reading the first feedback question
really
we're going to get to.
That easy.
Yeah, it's really simple. So definitely go get signed up today. Just deposit a few bucks, and that'll last you quite a while, depending on how much you're backing up. But when they measure it in Pico dollars, it's
it's obviously it's not expensive when it's measured in Pico dollars.
Yeah, I know. I think I put
millions
$10
in
a year ago, and still at like 8 something.
Well, I started for my New Year's resolution in January to back up my stuff properly, and I still haven't managed to spend a whole quarter yet.
Nice. Well, again, guys, go get signed up. Don't put it off any longer. Don't make any excuses, especially when you lose your data or something. You really don't want to be making excuses then when you could have taken care of it so easily. So tarsnap.com/BSD now. And if you talk to Colin or somebody over there, let them know that we sent you. We'd appreciate that.
If you want to know all the tips and tricks to make tarsnap working the best you can, there's a link to the tarsnap mastery book right there on the front page of tarsnap.com/BSD now.
Nice. Okay, well, let's get into the questions here. So first up, we have Sean, who asks about BEAdmin, which is the boot environment command line utility. So he says, on my server, I have 2 ZFS pools for root. He has a bootdir, which contains /boot and is not encrypted, and then a zroot, which contains everything except /boot, and of course is encrypted. He said, I was looking at running BEAdmin so that I could make use of multiple boot environments, but it doesn't support multiple pools, so I couldn't configure and use it. Yeah, that's correct. He asked, do we know of any boot environment alternatives, ports, or options that are available or that are being worked on that will work with a multiple ZFS on root pool setup?
It's really hard to do that because how do you decide which one gets used? See,
which one is snapped, which one's used?
So keeping snapshots so that you can have different kernels from your /boot lined up with the right user land to match it is kind of difficult. And the other thing is the way the BEAdmin stuff works is there's 2 bits of ZFS code in FreeBSD. There's GPT ZFS boot, which has a very stripped down implementation that's just enough to get the root file system up read-only so that you can load the kernel and boot. And it uses that as the entire /file system. It doesn't know what your mount points are or about any other pools. And so at that point, you don't actually even have a /etc or anything yet. Well, all you have is that /boot. Yeah. And so it's a bit complicated. I've looked at it before, but honestly, I don't use the encryption stuff, and it seemed too complicated to...
It is a somewhat complicated problem.
Even if you did it, it would be like... It seemed very fragile. That would easily break.
It's very hacky. Yeah. I say I have a fork of the BEAdmin utility we forked for PCBSD. I've been meaning to put that in the ports tree here at some point. But if you want to look at that on my GitHub repo, you're welcome to. If there's a patch or something somebody wants to send in to try and add some sort of way to do it, go for it. I don't know if we're going to look at it.
Well, especially considering on PCBSD, it already works because you can load the encrypted one pool.
Yeah.
And not have the
Well, that was one thing I was going to say. He doesn't say what he's doing here. If he's doing like a FreeBSD server or trying to run a desktop or a laptop or something.
Yeah, it depends on the use case, I suppose.
But if you wanted to, you could always use the PCBSD installer, and then you'll end up with Grub as the bootloader. So if you have some problem with that, then that isn't going to work for you. But if you want boot environments, the PCBSD installer will do either a server or desktop or laptop or whatever, and you have a working boot environment because everything's in the one pool. And then you have an encrypted kernel as well, which is kind of cool. You can be sure nobody's mucking about in your /boot directory.
Yeah, and mostly it solves a bunch of fragility problems. Also with upgrades, the problem with having this separate /boot during an upgrade is merge master is like, /boot is a symlink. I'm going to obliterate that. And it's like, whoops.
Yeah.
And then you're like, why is my, you look at /boot/kernel and it's actually you didn't realize it, but it's actually coming from your main pool, your zroot pool, not your bootdir pool. And it's like, all right, so that's the new kernel I just installed, but every time I reboot, I'm getting this old kernel. Where's that coming from?
Yeah. It gets very confusing very quick.
So, yeah.
But anyway, I hope some of that helped you, Sean. But let us know if you come up with some creative way to fix this or some sort of solution. I'd be curious to know because I do work on the boot environment utilities.
If I use this more, I probably would look at making a solution to it. But honestly, I don't usually have encrypted disks, so I've not had to mess with it.
I only have them encrypted on my laptop. Everything else is not. So, and then my home directory is encrypted on a key now. So,
I'm hoping to hear back from Devin Teskey this weekend for the stuff for the FreeBSD bootloader to be able to do boot environments similar to the way you're doing them in Grub. So there'll be
that'd be cool. Look forward to see
config
that.
file that has all of the list of boot environments, and we'll write a nice little patch to BEAdmin to regenerate that list or whatever, and should be lots of fun.
Yeah, let me know when you're ready to put that in. I'll help you guys put that in BEAdmin, or I can write it for you if you just tell me what syntax you're using. That would be really nice to have in there.
Cool.
And it's just a flag you can set, like, do this. If
right,
this
because
file
you already have one for Grub, right? If Grub equals 1, do this.
Just Grub equals yes.
Yeah, we'll just make, if BSD equals yes, then, or something like that.
Okay, next up we have Ron, who writes to us about BSD at Linux events. Hey, we talked about this a little earlier, but he says that Southeast Linux Fest is going to be June 12th through 14th here in Charlotte, just up the road from me, actually. He says, backstory, I'm not a sysadmin, but I am a BSD desktop user. He says Mac OS X and OpenBSD. I am very familiar with PCBSD, been using it since 7.0. Wow, that's a long time. But he said he recently switched to running OpenBSD. He said, I know one of the speakers. We worked together for about a year. He used to poke me for using BSD till I showed him that his beloved PS4 and Mac OS X was rooted in BSD. So he says, the question is, I plan to attend. However, as a non-sysadmin, non-BSD guru, what can I do as a BSD evangelist at a Linux Fest to promote BSD within reason? So nothing crazy, I guess.
The biggest thing is answer questions. Linux people have a lot of questions about BSD, and they just don't know. They haven't heard about it, and telling people things like OS X and PS4 are based on BSD and stuff. But I think the biggest one is, wear a T-shirt or something that clearly identifies you as a BSD guy and answer questions.
Well, I think it gives you, even at a Linux event, I would say that even gives you more legitimacy to talk to folks of, hey, I'm not because there's kind of this stereotype, right? Only super technical people are going to use BSD. It's too hard or whatever. But if you can walk up and say, no, I'm running it right here on my desktop or my laptop or whatever, and I'm not a super technical guy, but it works. Like, for example, being able to run OpenBSD on that, I mean, that may turn some heads and get some people interested. So that's the kind of stuff you can definitely talk about. I think there's going to be an IX Systems booth there as well. I think Josh Smith here is going to be driving over to that because this is held when we're in Canada.
The exact same weekend as BSD Can. So most of the BSD people
otherwise I would have driven to it.
I think there will also be a crew from Jupiter Broadcasting there as well.
Okay. Yeah. So definitely go hunt down the BSD booth and go hang out a little bit and talk to folks as they come by. I'm sure we always enjoy having BSD users come by and talk to us and talk to others as they're milling about. Okay, so who's next? We got Charles.
Yeah, so
I like these short emails. These are nice.
So Charles writes in about scrubbing a ZFS pool. He says, so I've heard that it's recommended to scrub a Z pool built on consumer-based drives once a week. Once a week might be a bit frequent. I
do monthly usually. But
depending on how much data you have, it can take a week to scrub it. But yes, you want to do it, at least once a month. And I'd say for enterprise stuff, once a quarter. Some people are more paranoid than others. It really depends. It also depends, if you're using if the server's under heavy load, it takes longer and hurts performance more to do a scrub. And so you might have to do them less frequently or time them to happen at specific times when there'll be less traffic and so on. But anyway, he says, however, I have a file server that's usually powered down while I'm away at work. He says, at times it may not be powered up for several days. In that case, how often do you think I should scrub it? Part of your problem is depending on how much data you have, your scrub might take longer than you normally leave the machine powered on for.
Right.
And so that could be a bit of an issue.
Wait, does a scrub resume, Alan, if you shut down
I don't
in the middle
actually
of it?
know.
I've never tried
I have
it,
servers, like other than my laptop, every ZFS machine I have is usually on for hundreds of days at a time. I don't actually know what happens. I think it starts over when you reboot, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, maybe somebody will send us something real quick telling us
I'm
what
not
it
sure
really
if it
does.
resumes or if
We've
it
not
starts
tried
over or if it cancels it or what. I know you can cancel it by doing scrub -s or something like that for stop. But there's a couple things to realize. With the way ZFS works, every file is scrubbed as you use it. So when you read a file, it's doing basically the same thing as the scrub. It reads the block, checks the checksum, and so on. So the scrub doesn't necessarily help find anything that's wrong with files you're using all the time. The main idea, so what scrub does is read every file, and so it will, poke those files that you don't use very often and make sure they're still okay. So depending on your use, how often you have to do it will vary, but I would say once a month is enough. But if you're really paranoid about it, you might want to do it more often. Also, depends on the level of redundancy you have. If you have, a RAID Z2 or something where you can, if there's a bit error on one disk, you have 2 backup copies on with the redundancy, then it's a little bit less of an issue to find it sooner rather than later. Whereas if you have no redundancy in your pool, you probably want to do it more often.
Okay. Lastly, we have a Boston who's writing back to us. We've been going back and forth with him a little bit. He's been talking to us about his FreeNAS box. So he says, first of all, thank you for taking my question and giving some comments. He said, I have a follow-up. And I said, in between comments, Chris said it would be nice to have the D-message output. So he ran it, and he sent us the output. If you want to take a look at these, we have these in the show notes.
Weird stuff about memory debugging, but I'm guessing that's just something that FreeNAS turned on for debugging. Although all of the things it's talking about are TCP and UDP, so it's all based on the network stack. So I wouldn't expect
stuff.
This to be causing you any ZFS problems.
But then he sends some other updated stuff from his zpool status about permanent errors being detected in some of the following files.
And now it says there doesn't. Right. Well, if the file is deleted and gone now from all the snapshots and everything, then that error won't exist anymore. Or if it fixed it, but I doubt it did. So he says the new GUI has a verify install button, and it says it returned a message about check some mismatches on a file. He says he tried to do an update, but it failed. I'm not sure. I don't know where to find log messages on a FreeNAS, honestly.
Well, he says he has 8 gigabytes of ECC memory, and he said this happened while one user was copying a large file from FreeNAS. Nobody else was connected to Plex. He said nothing else is running on the box, but he still saw in the GUI a flashing red light with a message critical. The volume ZFS state is online. One or more devices has experienced an error resulting in data corruption. Applications may be affected. So he says, can I find out which devices experienced the error, why the error occurred, what can I do so I don't see the error, so the error won't occur anymore?
Right, so if you do zpool status, it should list
show you
every device that's in the pool, and then one of the columns is CKSUM or checksum, and that'll tell you how many checksum errors that disk has had.
Yeah, and the reason I asked about D-message was on one of mine, I would see like SATA errors.
It doesn't look like a failed hard drive or something because, you'd normally see like ADA to,
failed to respond.
We tried this and we tried 4 times and it still didn't work, kind of thing.
But I think you may end up needing to talk to the FreeNAS guys about this. I don't know if it's necessarily a bug, but definitely worth posting to their forums just to ask them. The GUI is showing this, but where does it indicate which drive is bad? Are there any additional logs that it's storing somewhere that might help you indicate? Because what you're sending us here, I'm not seeing necessarily something that says this disk is bad or this disk had the failures.
Sorry,
but then he does have some other checksum mismatches, right? But maybe get in touch with those guys here. Or if there's a FreeNAS user listening who wants to take a look at this email that he sent us with the information he did provide, definitely let us know. We will be happy to pass that along to him. But definitely something's not quite right. Okay, well, that actually wraps up our feedback and questions for the week. So as we close out the show, you guys know what we got to mention here, but you need to send us stuff. So feedback at bsdnow.tv is where you send stuff to. And of course, we're always open to ideas for anything you'd like to see on the show. And also, as promised last week, the OpenBSD 5.7 CDs have arrived, and we have some links to pictures, which I'm sure you can show on the screen there, Alan.
There you got pictures of the CD set from OpenBSD 5.7 with their little Blues Brother motif.
Yep.
And you see the CD.
They always have such good artwork. It's pretty cool.
They got the CD, and in addition to OpenBSD and the cool picture, you can see around the edges they actually have the signatures for the base system and the package system for Signify.
That's a neat idea. I'd like to do that. Put our checksum on the outside or something.
Yeah, and then they have CD1's got i386 Alpha and HPPA. Then CD2's AMD 64 PowerPC and the Song. And then CD3 is Spark 64 and the source code, and so on. And you get the fancy case with even more artwork, some stickers, a little pamphlet thing, and lots of good stuff.
Yeah, definitely. So you need to go order yours. Get them in the mail. And also, if you live in the New York area or can get there or will be there around June 17th to 18th, the Nice Bug and CD Bug are planning to have a number of presentations in the coming months.
Yes.
So
Nice Bug has John Baldwin talking about NUMA, which is in a system where you have multiple processors. Half your RAM is on, some of your RAM banks are on one processor and some on the other processor. So having processor 1 try to talk to the RAM that's connected to processor 2 takes longer. So with the NUMA in FreeBSD, it'll be like, okay, if the program's going to run in processor 1, let's keep its code in the memory on processor 1. And basically teaching the operating system about the costs of moving data back and forth between processors and try to, keep stuff local. And the same thing applies to your PCI Express slots. So if you have a 10 or 40 gigabit network card and it's in one of the slots that's on processor number 2, you want to keep the memory for like your network buffers or whatever that are going to get sent to that network card on the RAM that's on the same processor instead of on one that's different. And so John Baldwin and Adrian Chad and a bunch of other people are working on the NUMA stuff to teach the operating system about that and how to improve performance with it.
Nice.
And then 2 weeks after that, Ingo Swarzy is going to be talking about Mandoc, doing it from scratch, and basically over the last 6 years, how he and other people have built the Mandoc, and now it's the standard BSD documentation toolkit for everything. It's replaced all the old ones in all the BSDs now.
Nice. Also, here's another one. If you're in South America, which we don't have too many conferences we talk about down there, but BSDCon Brazil is going to be happening in October. So we have a link to the announcement for that. So if you're in South America, this could be the one to go to for you if you can't make it up to Canada. But I look forward to hearing how that goes. We'll have to, hopefully you guys take a lot of good pictures and record your talks. That would be
although it looks like the majority of it will be in Portuguese, although they're also accepting talks in Spanish and English.
Nice. Okay. Well, yeah, that's definitely neat to see. So that's, of course, happening in October. So if you'd like to hit up our show notes and take a look at the announcement for that. And, of course, the call for papers and all that is up there as well.
Yes.
So we thank you guys very much for being with us on this week's show. I know I enjoyed it.
Yes.
I hope you enjoyed doing the show today, Alan. And we'll look forward to talking to you guys again next week, 1 week closer to BSDCan. And that's kind of like the culmination of my year, right, for BSD. It's like BSDCan's happening. Yep. But definitely, you got a month. So if you can get out to that, make your travel plans now. Don't wait any longer.
Yes. But I look forward to seeing many people there.
Yes, definitely. So we'll see you guys same time next week, though. So come right back to stay tuned to BSD Now.